As sleep approaches, questions begin to shift. In this video, we explore a single idea: what will happen after death? From different perspectives, quietly, without forcing anything. These are not theories meant to reach a conclusion. They exist to flow gently with your thoughts. Welcome to Sleepy Theories. Theory 1. Life in the grave. The question of what happens after death is one of the oldest questions in human history. The idea of life in the grave emerges as one of the earliest answers to this question. According to this understanding, death is not the end of everything. The human body returns to the earth, but consciousness enters a different process. Life in the grave is described as a period between this world and the hereafter. It is not fully life, nor is it complete non-existence. How time passes in this state is not clearly known. In some accounts, it lasts for many years. In others, it feels like a very brief moment. In the grave, a person's life in the world gains importance. What they did, the choices they made, what they valued. This life is defined as a state of waiting. Judgment has not yet begun, but consciousness is no longer the same as it was in the world. The idea of life in the grave suggests that death is not a sudden rupture. It is a transition, a pause. For many people, this thought is comforting, because death stops being a completely unknown void. It becomes part of a process that can be given meaning. However, the certainty of this theory is unclear. Life in the grave is not knowledge gained through experience. It is built on belief and narratives. Still, this idea keeps one thought alive. Death is not the end. It may simply be the beginning of another process. Theory 2. The hereafter and the day of judgment. The idea of the hereafter and the day of judgment is one of the most comprehensive explanations of what comes after death. According to this view, death is a temporary stop. The true outcome comes later. The hereafter is not a continuation of life in the world, but its result. A person is resurrected and confronts everything they did throughout their life. The day of judgment is the moment when this confrontation takes place. Good and evil are separated. Every action has a consequence. In this understanding, time does not function as it does in the world. How long it lasts is unknown, but complete justice is emphasized. Belief in the hereafter strongly shapes human behavior, because life stops being limited to the moments we live. Everything done gains meaning. According to this theory, nothing is completely lost. Words, intentions, even thoughts, all are considered to be recorded. The idea of the hereafter and the day of judgment shifts the fear of death to a different place. The fear is not of disappearing, but of being held accountable. For some, this thought feels heavy. For others, it creates order. What is certain is this: this theory removes death from pure uncertainty, but fills it with responsibility. And it says that life is a journey with a beginning and an end. Theory 3. The realm of Barzakh. The realm of Barzakh is a concept used to describe the process between death and the hereafter. According to this understanding, consciousness does not completely disappear after death, but life in the world does not continue either. Barzakh is seen as a transitional state between two conditions. It belongs neither to worldly life nor to the hereafter itself. In this process, a person no longer lives with a physical body, but remains aware of their existence. How consciousness functions is not fully known. The concept of time is described differently here. It may feel like a long period of waiting, or it may be perceived as a very brief moment. In the realm of Barzakh, a person's life in the world becomes significant. What they did, their intentions, their perspective on life. Whether this period is a punishment or a reward is not clearly defined. In some accounts it is seen as a phase of preparation. In others it is described simply as a state of waiting. The idea of Barzakh suggests that death is not an abrupt end. Consciousness moves from one stage to another, but has not yet reached the final point. This thought removes death from being a single moment and turns it into part of a process made of stages. What is certain is this: the realm of Barzakh does not completely remove the uncertainty of what comes after death, but it places meaning between death and judgment, and it suggests that before completely disappearing, a person pauses for a while. Theory 4. Heaven and Hell. Heaven and hell are described as the final stage of the process after death. In this understanding, life is tied to a system of consequence. What is done produces results. Heaven is defined as a reward. It is associated with peace, safety, and continuity. It is described as a form of existence without pain or lack. Hell, on the other hand, is explained through the idea of punishment. It is a space of regret, loss, and confrontation with consequences, a state in which a person is left alone with what they have done. These two concepts are not thought of only as places. They also represent a condition, the experience of an outcome. Belief in heaven and hell removes life from being merely temporary. A person considers their choices to have lasting effects. This shapes behavior. In this theory, justice is central. No one is treated unfairly. Every outcome is connected to the life that was lived. However, what these states are like as experiences is not certain. Whether they are physical or spiritual is unclear. Descriptions are made in ways humans can understand. The idea of heaven and hell does not see death as an end. It treats it as a point of completion. It allows life to become a meaningful whole. And this theory says this: nothing that is lived is wasted. Everything finds its answer somewhere. Theory 5. The separation of the soul from the body. The separation of the soul from the body is one of the fundamental ideas used to explain the moment of death. According to this understanding, death begins when the body stops functioning. But existence does not completely end. The body loses its function. The heart stops. Breathing ceases. At this point, the soul is considered to separate from the body. How this separation occurs is unknown. It is not a physical movement. It cannot be perceived by the senses. According to accounts, this moment is not experienced the same way by everyone. For some, it is sudden and fast. For others, it is a slow and noticeable process. When the soul separates from the body, the connection with the world is broken. Physical states, such as pain, hunger, and fatigue, come to an end. Consciousness shifts into a different state. This theory does not see death as annihilation. It defines it as a separation, a moment when the paths of body and soul diverge. The idea of the soul leaving the body is a thought that reduces fear of death. because it says that existence is not completely erased. It simply changes form. However, how this process is experienced is not certain. The knowledge is based on narratives, not observation. Still, it helps give meaning to the moment of death. And according to this theory, death is not an end. It is a transition. Theory 5. The separation of the soul from the body. The separation of the soul from the body is one of the fundamental ideas used to explain the moment of death. According to this understanding, death begins when the body stops functioning. But existence does not completely end. The body loses its function. The heart stops. Breathing ceases. At this point, the soul is considered to separate from the body. How this separation occurs is unknown. It is not a physical movement. It cannot be perceived by the senses. According to accounts, this moment is not experienced the same way by everyone. For some, it is sudden and fast. For others, it is a slow and noticeable process. When the soul separates from the body, the connection with the world is broken. Physical states, such as pain, hunger, and fatigue, come to an end. Consciousness shifts into a different state. This theory does not see death as annihilation. It defines it as a separation, a moment when the paths of body and soul diverge. The idea of the soul leaving the body is a thought that reduces fear of death, because it says that existence is not completely erased. It simply changes form. However, how this process is experienced is not certain. The knowledge is based on narratives, not observation. Still, it helps give meaning to the moment of death. And according to this theory, death is not an end. It is a transition. Theory 6. Heaven and Hell in Christianity. In Christianity, life after death is explained through the relationship with God. Heaven and hell are the result of this relationship. Heaven is defined as a state of closeness to God. A person lives in the presence of God. Pain, fear, and lack have no place in this state. Hell, on the other hand, is the state of being separated from God. This separation is seen as a punishment. It is described as a conscious experience of distance. In this understanding, heaven and hell are not merely places. They also express a spiritual condition. They gain meaning through closeness and distance. In Christian teaching, salvation holds a central place. Faith, repentance, and God's grace are considered decisive. The choices a person makes throughout life produce consequences. According to this theory, death is not the final point of decision. The true outcome is given after death, and this outcome is permanent. The idea of heaven and hell removes life from being temporary. A person sees their life as a meaningful whole. Every action affects the relationship with God. This understanding does not treat death as annihilation. It represents the final state of a person's bond with God. Theory 7. The Final Judgment. The final judgment is considered the ultimate stage of the process after death. According to this understanding, all people are resurrected, and they are evaluated based on what they did throughout their lives. In the final judgment, nothing remains hidden. Words, actions, intentions, all are revealed. This judgment is not made by human standards. It is based on the idea of absolute justice. It is accepted that no injustice will occur. How time functions in this process is unknown. The length of the waiting is not important. What matters is the certainty of the verdict. The idea of the final judgment views life as a whole. It sees it as a journey with a beginning and an end. Each stage is connected to the next. In this theory, forgiveness and accountability exist together. A person both confronts what they have done and encounters the idea of mercy. The final judgment removes death from uncertainty. It turns life into a meaningful process. It says that every choice has a consequence. And according to this theory, a person is not completely forgotten in the end. The life they've lived finds its response. Theory 8. The belief in purgatory. The belief in purgatory places the afterlife between two extremes, neither a complete reward nor a final punishment. According to this understanding, purgatory is a temporary state. A person has not yet reached the final outcome. They pass through a process of purification. The purpose of purgatory is not to punish. It is to complete what is lacking. It is seen as a preparation of the soul. How time passes in this process is not clear. It may feel short or long, but it is not permanent. The belief in purgatory establishes a balance between justice and mercy. It says that a person does not completely disappear, but also does not move directly to reward. This theory accepts that life is not black and white. A person is not only good or evil. Choices create intermediate states. The idea of purgatory softens the fear of death, because it suggests that everything is not finalized in a single moment. It tells of a process that continues, and this belief explains the afterlife, not through sharp boundaries, but through transitions. Theory 9. Olam Haba. Olam Haba is a concept in Jewish tradition that refers to life after death. Its meaning is explained as the world to come. In this understanding, death is not a definitive end. A person moves into another stage of existence. However, the details of this stage are not clearly defined. Olam Haba is not seen as a continuation of life in the world. Rather, it is considered the result of life. The choices a person makes gain importance here. In this belief, actions are central. Good deeds and just behavior are decisive. Lifestyle is emphasized more than belief. What Olam Haba is like as an experience is unclear. Whether it is a physical place or a spiritual state is not settled. This ambiguity is deliberately preserved. This understanding does not describe the afterlife with detailed imagery. It directs the person toward responsibility in the world. It reminds that life is lived here and now. The idea of Olam Haba removes death from being a frightening unknown, but leaves it as a transition that inspires curiosity. Instead of definite answers, it offers a meaningful expectation. And according to this theory, a person shapes the world to come through the life they live. Theory 10. Belief in resurrection. The belief in resurrection holds that after death, a human being will return to life. According to this understanding, death is not a permanent end. It is a temporary state. A person is resurrected after a certain period of time. This resurrection takes place together with the body. Soul and body are reunited. The timing of the resurrection is not known. This event is tied to divine time. For the human being, there is a period of waiting. In this belief, justice holds an important place. Resurrection is necessary for accountability and recompense. What was done is evaluated through a being brought back to life. The idea of resurrection removes death from being a meaningless annihilation. It makes life part of a broader process. Each stage is connected to the next. According to this theory, a human being is not made up of the soul alone. The body also matters, because actions were carried out through the body. The belief in resurrection is a thought filled with hope, because it says that nothing ends completely. It tells of a life that begins again at some point. And this belief sees death, not as an end, but as an interval. Theory 11. Reincarnation. Reincarnation holds that after death, the soul is reborn in another body. In this understanding, life is not limited to a single existence. It is seen as a process made up of multiple lives. Death is not the end of this process. It is only the closing of one life. The soul continues its journey in a new body. In the belief in reincarnation, time is not linear. Beginnings and endings are intertwined. Each life carries traces of the previous one. In this theory, development is essential. The soul learns something in each life. What is incomplete is gradually completed. Not remembering past lives is considered natural, because the purpose is not to carry burdens, but to gain new experiences. The idea of reincarnation offers a different answer to the problem of justice. It is thought that a single life is not sufficient to explain everything. What is lived is balanced through other lives. In this understanding, death is not frightening. It is seen as a transition. Life continues in different forms, and according to this theory, a person may have lived not once, but many times. Theory 12. The law of karma. The law of karma holds that every action in life has a consequence. This consequence may not appear immediately, but it inevitably occurs. In this understanding, the relationship between cause and effect is fundamental. Thoughts, words, and actions create impact. These effects return over time. Karma is not seen as a system of punishment. It is a mechanism of balance. Its purpose is to teach and create awareness. According to this law, death does not stop the process. Effects can be carried across lives. Outcomes may appear at another time. The law of karma is considered together with the belief in reincarnation. An effect that begins in one life may continue in another. Balance does not have to be established within a single lifetime. In this understanding, good and evil are not absolute. What matters is intention. Every action is connected to the level of awareness. The idea of karma directs a person toward taking responsibility, because nothing completely disappears. Every effect leaves a trace, and according to this theory, life is not made of coincidences. It is made of interconnected consequences. Theory 13. The cycle of samsara. The cycle of samsara describes existence as continuing through an ongoing process of birth and death. In this understanding, life is not limited to a single beginning and end. It is seen as a repeating cycle. A person is born many times within this cycle, lives, and dies, then is born again. This process is not a mindless repetition. Each life carries the results of the previous one. Karma determines the direction of the cycle. In samsara, suffering holds an important place because existence is impermanent. Attachment leads to loss. In this understanding, the goal is not to sustain the cycle. It is to recognize it and eventually to leave it. Liberation from the cycle of samsara is associated with a transformation of consciousness. Letting go of desire and attachment is essential. As awareness grows, a person becomes free. According to this theory, death is not liberation. It is only a part of the cycle. The true aim is to step outside the cycle, and this understanding sees death not as an end, but as a moment within a continuously unfolding process. Theory 14. Nirvana. Nirvana refers to the state in which the cycle of existence comes to an end. The process of birth, death, and rebirth is completed here. In this understanding, nirvana is not a place. It is a state of consciousness that is attained. It is defined by the end of suffering and attachment. A being who reaches nirvana leaves the cycle of samsara. Rebirth no longer occurs because the causes have been extinguished. This state does not mean annihilation. It is the ending of desire, fear, and ignorance. It is described as the calming of the mind. In nirvana, the perception of time and self changes. The sense of I dissolves. Separation disappears. According to this theory, the source of suffering is attachment. Nirvana is the release of these bonds. The result is described as peace. The idea of nirvana does not place death at its center. It is seen as a state that can be reached while alive. Death is not a necessary condition for it, and this understanding explains the ultimate end, not as extinction, but as completion. Theory 15. The Bardo Process. The Bardo process defines the transitional period between death and rebirth. This understanding is especially present in the Tibetan tradition. Death is not seen as a single moment. Bardo means an intermediate state. Consciousness separates from the body it was accustomed to. It tries to adapt to a new condition. What is experienced during this process depends on the state of consciousness. Fears, desires, and habits become decisive. The mind encounters its own contents. The Bardo process is considered a period that can be guided. Awareness can change the course of the process. Consciousness may find an opportunity for liberation at this stage. How time passes is not certain. It may be perceived as days or as moments. This varies according to the experiencing consciousness. According to this theory, death is not a passive waiting. It is an active transition. Consciousness is still interacting, and the Bardo process is seen as the most delicate stage between death and a new beginning. Theory 16. The Chinvat Bridge. The Chinvat Bridge is a concept in Zoroastrian belief that describes the passage after death. In this understanding, every person crosses this bridge after dying. The bridge is a boundary between good and evil. A person's life in the world determines how the passage will unfold. Actions directly shape the outcome. For those who lived a good life, the bridge is wide and secure. The passage is easy. They reach the other side. For those who lived a bad life, the bridge narrows. The crossing becomes difficult. Falling is associated with punishment. The Chinvat Bridge represents an immediate judgment. There is no long waiting. The result appears directly. This theory places moral responsibility at its center. Every choice matters because the consequence is not delayed. The idea of the bridge removes death from being an abstract ending. It turns it into a concrete passage. A person confronts what they have done. And according to this understanding, death is not a stopping point. It is a moment of transition. Theory 17. Judgment after death in ancient Egypt. In ancient Egyptian belief, death is not seen as the end of life. A person moves into another stage of existence. This transition begins with a judgment. After death, the soul appears before Osiris. Here, a judgment is described in which the heart is weighed. The heart represents a person's life in the world. The heart is compared with the feather of truth. If the heart is heavy, the person is considered to have failed. A light heart is a sign of a righteous life. This judgment is based on moral behavior. Lies, injustice, and wrongdoing are decisive. Justice is the fundamental measure. Those who pass the judgment continue to live in the realm of the dead. This life resembles life in the world, but it is more ordered and enduring. For those who fail, there is no continuation. The soul encounters annihilation. Punishment is described not as eternal suffering, but as cessation. This theory ties the afterlife to clear rules. How a person lived truly matters. The outcome is determined by that life. And according to ancient Egyptian belief, justice after death is inevitable. Theory 18. Death and awakening in Sufism. In Sufism, death is not understood merely as the end of the body. What truly matters is the death a person experiences while alive. In this understanding, death is not annihilation, but an awakening. It begins with the dissolution of the self. According to Sufism, a person lives behind veils while in the world. Desire, fear, and ego form these veils. Death is seen as the moment when these veils are lifted. In this thought, the phrase "to die before dying" holds an important place. As a person sheds the ego, they move closer to truth. Physical death is the completion of this process. In Sufism, detailed descriptions of places after death are not emphasized. What matters is the state of consciousness. Closeness and awareness come to the forefront. Fear is not central in this understanding, because death is not separation, but a return to the origin. Sufism does not treat death as an ending. It sees it as a union. It explains it as a return to one's essence. And according to this perspective, death is not a dark ending. It is the recognition of real life. Theory 19. Gnostic salvation. In Gnostic thought, salvation is associated more with knowledge than with belief. This knowledge is not something learned from the outside. It emerges through recognizing one's own essence. According to Gnosticism, the human being is trapped within a material world. The soul exists in a place where it does not truly belong. Death becomes an opportunity for this condition to come to an end. In this understanding, salvation is possible through the awakening of consciousness. When a person recognizes their true nature, they become free. Ignorance is seen as the greatest obstacle. In Gnostic salvation, death alone is not sufficient. What truly matters is the awareness gained during life. If consciousness has not awakened, the cycle continues. In this teaching, heaven and hell are secondary concepts. What is central is the soul's return to its source. Separation comes to an end. Gnostic thought does not tie salvation to an external judgment. A person changes when they become aware of their own condition. Knowledge is a liberating force, and according to this theory, salvation is not a reward, it is remembrance. Theory 20. The Shamanic Soul Journey. In the shamanic understanding, death is not merely the end of the body. The soul journeys into a different dimension. Shamans support this journey through guidance and ritual. The soul passes into unknown worlds. There it encounters nature spirits and ancestors. This journey is not limited to death alone. It can also be experienced in trance states while alive, but death represents the most permanent transition. In shamanic tradition, the soul's experiences are personal and unique. No journey is exactly the same as another. Each soul encounters its own questions. According to this theory, death is not annihilation. The soul moves through different dimensions of consciousness. It gains new understanding and awareness. And in the shamanic view, death is not an ending. It is the doorway into the soul's journey. Theory 21. Layers of the soul in esoteric Christianity. In esoteric Christianity, the soul is not regarded as a single, indivisible whole. It is believed to consist of several layers. Each layer is shaped by experiences and levels of consciousness acquired throughout life. Death begins with the end of the body, but all layers of the soul continue to exist in different forms. Some layers reach light or purification immediately. Others remain bound for a certain period and complete their own process. In this understanding, death is not a one-stage transition. The soul advances step by step. In each layer, learning, awareness, and transformation take place. The layers reflect the soul's level of maturity, and progress is connected to consciousness. In esoteric thought, heaven and hell represent different states of the soul. Reward and punishment depend on the condition of the soul rather than on locations. Good and evil are reflected across the layers. As the soul's experiences deepen, understanding grows. According to this theory, death is not an end. It is a transition and a process of purification. As the soul moves through the layers, it carries the effects of past life. In each layer, it becomes a little more aware, a little more mature. And according to the esoteric Christian understanding, the human soul continues its journey after death, within an endless process of learning and purification. It continues to find its own light. Theory 22. Belief in divine unity. The belief in divine unity explains life after death as a process of merging with God or universal consciousness. According to this understanding, death marks the end of bodily life, but the soul never disappears. On the contrary, it moves toward union with the whole. In this belief, the human being does not remain a separate entity. The soul dissolves within divine unity. The individual self fades, and union with universal consciousness occurs. Death is not an ending, but a transformation. Limited life comes to an end. Unity with infinite consciousness begins. Within divine unity, there is no concept of time or space. The soul is freed from ties to past and future. Only the essence of existence is experienced. This understanding softens the fear of death, because there is no loss, only transformation. The soul remembers its own essence and universal truth once again, and the belief in divine unity sees death not as an end, but as a beginning in which the soul becomes whole with its true nature. Theory 23. Being welcomed by angels. In some beliefs, death is not seen as a solitary process. The soul is welcomed and guided by angels. According to this understanding, when the soul leaves the body, it is not alone. Angels guide the soul and carry it into the next stages. Feelings of fear and uncertainty are reduced. The presence of angels ensures that the soul makes a safe transition. They do not act without awareness of the person's life. They move with understanding of the choices made and the state of the soul. This process shows that death is not merely a test or a punishment, but a guided transition. Angels support the soul in purification, accountability, and preparation for what comes next. According to this theory, death does not signify a lonely ending. There is a process of guidance. The soul completes its passage in the presence of angels and reaches the next stage of existence. Theory 24. Divine silence. According to the understanding of divine silence, death begins with a state of absolute quiet and stillness. The body stops, the breath ceases, and the connection with the world is severed. But within this silence, the soul gains a new awareness. In this thought, death is not annihilation, but a transition in which consciousness adapts to silence. There is no sound, no chaos, and no sense of time, only deep tranquility. Divine silence allows the soul to return to its own essence. An awareness independent of the external world begins. The mind becomes calm, and the soul experiences an inner awakening. In this understanding, fear of death is unnecessary, because there is no loss, only a silent transformation. The soul moves closer to wholeness and to the divine within the silence. And according to the idea of divine silence, death is not an end. It is a quiet beginning for consciousness. Theory 25. Death as a transition. In many beliefs and philosophies, death is not seen as an end, but as a transition. The body stops and physical life comes to an end, but consciousness does not completely disappear. The soul moves into another stage of existence. In this understanding, death is not a sudden rupture. It is a process. A journey begins. The soul carries the effects of the past life and moves toward new stages. The transition is experienced differently by each individual. For some, it is fast and calm. For others, it is a process experienced with awareness. According to this theory, death is not frightening or unknown. It is simply a pause, an intermediate point. And this transition is connected to the choices the soul made during life. Everything gains meaning for the next stage. Theory 26. Plato's understanding of the soul. According to Plato, the soul is immortal and exists independently of the body. The body is a temporary dwelling for the soul, and death is seen as the moment when the soul attains freedom. Plato defines the soul in three layers: reason, spirit, and desire. Reason seeks knowledge and truth. Spirit directs action. Desire represents bodily and temporary needs. With death, the soul is freed from the influence of bodily desires and exists only through reason and consciousness. After death, the soul continues the process of remembering and knowing. According to Plato, during life the soul tries to recall knowledge from the world of forms. Death is the moment when the obstacle to this remembering is removed. In this understanding, death is not an end. It is a transformation. The soul is purified from bodily limitations and moved closer to its true nature. The choices made during life affect how pure and mature the soul becomes in this transformation. Plato's view of the soul emphasizes that death is not something to be feared. Death is not a loss, but a process in which the soul unites with its own essence through knowledge and awareness. And according to this theory, a human being does not disappear with death. They are simply freed from bodily limitations and continue the soul's journey. Theory 27. Soul and Form in Aristotle. According to Aristotle, the soul is the form of the body, that is, the essence that determines how life functions. The soul cannot be thought of without the body, but with death its functions come to an end. Aristotle examines the soul in 3 levels. The vegetative soul provides the basis of life. The animal soul governs sensation and movement. The rational soul carries the capacity for thought and reason. With death, vegetative and animal functions cease. However, according to some interpretations, the rational aspect of the human soul is immortal and maintains its relationship with knowledge. For this reason, the soul does not completely disappear. Especially its rational and conscious dimensions may continue after death. In Aristotle's view, although death appears as an end, the rational part of the soul reaches its true form. The soul is shaped by experience and knowledge. The understanding gained during life acquires value through death. This theory shows that death is not merely a bodily ending. Even when separated from the body, the soul remains as an existence in the dimension of learning and awareness. And according to this understanding, a human being does not vanish with death. By being freed from bodily limitations, they move closer to the essence of form and consciousness. Theory 28. Epicurus' view of nothingness. According to Epicurus, death marks a complete end in terms of consciousness and experience. When the body ceases, the functions of the soul also come to an end, and consciousness disappears entirely. In this view, death is not something to be feared. Because consciousness is gone, pain, fear, or pleasure can no longer be felt. Nothingness is a state in which experience has completely ended. Epicurus argues that the true source of the fear of death lies in false beliefs. People assume they will suffer pain or punishment after death. Yet since death is the end of experience, nothing is felt at all. According to this theory, death is not a loss, is not an annihilation. It is simply a transition into unconsciousness. Epicurus' philosophy gives death meaning. The value of life arises from the inevitability of death. Rather than fearing death, it encourages focusing on the worth of living. Theory 29. Stoic return to nature. According to the Stoics, death is not the complete destruction of the soul or the body, but a process of returning to nature. After life's functions cease, the body merges back into the earth. The soul returns to the order of the universe and to universal reason. Individual identity dissolves here. The soul reunites with the whole. In this understanding, death is not a fearful end, because a person has lived as part of the universe and now becomes one with it again. The choices made during life affect how harmoniously the soul completes this return. In the Stoic view, death is a natural process. If a person has lived in accordance with the order of the universe, death is not a loss, but a moment of completion and harmony. And according to this theory, a human being does not vanish with death. They simply rejoin the wholeness of the universe and continue to exist within the order of nature. Theory 30. Descartes' mind-body dualism. According to Descartes, a human being consists of two distinct substances, body and mind. The body is temporary and physical, while the mind or soul is immortal. Death is the moment when the body's functions come to an end. The heart stops, breathing ceases, and the organs no longer function. Yet the mind continues to exist independently of the body. In this view, the mind carries the capacity for thought and awareness. With death, the body perishes, but the mind attains freedom. Its limits are no longer confined to the physical world. Descartes argues that death is not a frightening end, because the true self is not the body, but the mind. The end of the body is not the end of the mind. Rather, it is the beginning of an independent existence. According to this theory, a human being does not disappear with death. The mind separates from the body and continues its own journey of consciousness. Theory 31. Spinoza's view of a single substance. According to Spinoza, everything in the universe is a different expression of a single substance. Human beings and the soul are parts of this one substance and are not considered separate entities. Although death means the end of individual consciousness, the soul or mind does not vanish by dissolving into nothingness. Instead, the individual self merges into the essence of the universal whole. In this understanding, death is not a loss, but a process of transformation and reintegration. When the body loses its functions, its elements return to nature and the universe. Mind and consciousness continue as part of the universal flow. According to Spinoza, the choices made during life influence how the soul takes shape within this process of unity. Death is not an individual ending, but a step within the natural functioning of the single substance. And according to this theory, a human being does not disappear with death. Individual boundaries dissolve, and existence continues within universal unity. Theory 32. Kant and the unknowability of the afterlife. According to Kant, what comes after death is a domain that cannot be known with certainty by human reason. The body dies, life ends, but there is no definitive knowledge about the state of the soul. In this view, death may appear as an ending, yet human experience and reason cannot provide clear knowledge about what follows. Ideas such as an afterlife, resurrection, or annihilation can only be approached through belief in the limits of reason. Kant accepts the mystery of death. It is not possible to know what happens afterward, but preserving the value of moral life is essential. By living rightly and virtuously, a person prepares for whatever may follow death. This theory states that there is no certain knowledge of death's aftermath. The unknown is not a source of emptiness or fear. It emphasizes the importance of ethical and conscious choices during life. And according to Kant, a human being cannot be said to vanish or attain eternity with certainty. Yet awareness of death's mystery gives meaning to life. Theory 33. Hume's critique of the self. According to Hume, the self is not a fixed or enduring entity. It is merely a collection of experiences and perceptions. In this view, death means the end of physical and mental processes. The body stops, conscious experiences cease, and what we call the self no longer continues. Hume does not argue for the immortality of the soul or its existence independent of the body. With death, personal experiences and perceptions also come to an end. The individual self survives only in memories and in the effects left behind during life. According to this theory, death is not a loss or something to be feared, because the self was never a permanent entity. Its disappearance is a natural process, and according to Hume, a human being ceases to exist with death. Individual consciousness ends. The sum of experiences may leave traces in the world, but the self itself is gone. Theory 34. Schopenhauer's idea of the continuation of the will. According to Schopenhauer, a human being is not merely a body. They are a manifestation of the will to live. Death is the moment when the body comes to an end. But this will is not limited to the individual self. It continues to exist as a universal and enduring force. In this view, death means the end of individual desires and experiences. Yet the essence of the will, the fundamental driving force of life, does not disappear. This force continues in other forms of life or within the universal flow. Schopenhauer argues that the individual does not vanish completely with death. Personal experience ends, but the essence of existence continues as universal will. According to this theory, a human being does not disappear with death. The body perishes, but the energy and existence belonging to the will, the core force of life, continue. Theory 35. Annihilation in Nietzsche. According to Nietzsche, death is the end of individual existence. Body and consciousness cease. The human being vanishes as an individual. In this understanding, death is a final ending and an absolute break. Soul or consciousness does not continue after death. No personal experience survives as a conscious existence. Nietzsche rejects hopes or fears related to an afterlife. Death is a natural part of nature and life, yet the individual self is extinguished. According to this theory, death is not a loss. It is the natural conclusion of life. Individual consciousness ends, while the universe and nature remain unaffected. And according to Nietzsche, a human being ceases to exist with death. No consciousness or self continues. Only the flow of life goes on. Theory 36. Death and existentialism. According to existentialism, death defines the limit and meaning of human existence. Death is inevitable and is a personal experience for each individual. In this view, death appears as an ending, yet its true significance emerges through the choices made during life. A person gives meaning to life through freedom and responsibility. Existentialists accept the unknown nature of death. Consciousness ends together with the body, but awareness of death deepens the value and meaning of life. According to this theory, death ends the individual as an annihilation, yet the choices made and the awareness gained during life shape one's existence. And in existentialism, a human being physically ceases to exist with death. But death is a boundary that gives life meaning and strengthens responsibility. Theory 37. Heidegger's concept of being toward death. According to Heidegger, death is an inevitable boundary that completes human existence. Death is not merely the end of life. It is a possibility that allows the individual to become aware of their own being. In this understanding, death is approached with conscious awareness. By accepting their mortality, a person gives meaning to their life. Every choice and every experience becomes more valuable through awareness of death. Heidegger does not see death as annihilation, but as a movement toward authentic existence. Death confronts the individual with their own reality. It enables an understanding of the balance between what is temporary and what is enduring. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a process that completes individual existence. Awareness of death makes it possible to live life more deeply. And according to Heidegger, a human being does not simply vanish with death. Rather, death is a fundamental phenomenon that reveals the meaning of existence. Theory 38. The end of consciousness in Sartre. According to Sartre, death is the definitive end of individual consciousness and subjective experience. The body loses its functions and consciousness comes to a complete stop. A person can no longer exist through self-awareness. In this view, death is a clear expression of annihilation. Soul or consciousness does not continue independently of the body. Personal experience and the self come to an absolute end. Sartre rejects the idea of an afterlife or continuing consciousness. Death is the moment when an individual's presence in the world and their responsibilities come to an end. According to this theory, death is not a loss, but a natural consequence of existence. Physical and conscious experience ends. The individual self disappears, and according to Sartre, a human being ceases to exist consciously with death. No consciousness or spiritual entity continues after death. Theory 39. The absurd and death in Camus. According to Camus, death is one of the fundamental realities through which a human being confronts existence. The meaning of life is tied to constant searching. Death interrupts this search. Camus sees life as an absurd process. Human beings seek meaning while the universe remains indifferent. Death is the moment of confrontation with this certainty of meaninglessness. In this understanding, death is the symbol of annihilation and finitude. Soul or consciousness ends with death. Individual experience disappears. No conscious awareness continues. Camus rejects fear of death, because death is a reminder to accept the absurdity of life and to live it as it is. According to this theory, death is an ending and an unconscious annihilation, but it is also a condition that makes it possible for a person to give meaning to life and make free choices. And according to Camus, a human being ceases to exist with death. Yet death offers an opportunity to understand the absurd nature of life. Theory 40. Dissolution of the self in Eastern philosophy. In Eastern philosophies, death is seen as the end of the individual self and a return to the true nature of essence. The body stops. Temporary desires and attachments dissolve. but the soul or essence merges with the universal whole. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is the dissolution of the ego and liberation from a limited identity. The personal self is freed from concerns of past and future. Only the essence of existence is experienced. Eastern philosophy often associates the post-death experience with meditation and awareness. The soul passes through this transition shaped by the awareness gained during life and ultimately reaches freedom. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a transformation within the natural flow of consciousness and soul. As the personal self dissolves, essence returns to its true reality. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death. Only the limited identity dissolves and reunites with the universal whole. Theory 41. Return to the flow in Taoism. In Taoism, death is seen as a return to the natural flow of life. The body stops, physical functions come to an end. Yet the soul joins the flow in harmony with the order of the universe. In this understanding, death is not a loss or an ending. It is described as unity with nature and alignment with the universal order. The individual self dissolves. The sense of separation disappears. In Taoist thought, life and death are not opposites, but complementary processes. Death is part of the flow. Just as rivers reach the sea, the soul returns to the wholeness of the universe. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a transformation in harmony with nature. The individual releases their limited existence and enters the universal flow. And according to Taoism, a human being does not vanish with death, only transcends individual boundaries and becomes part of the continuous flow of the universe. Theory 42. The union of Atman and Brahman. In Hindu philosophy, death is seen as the process in which Atman, the individual soul, unites with Brahman. The body dies, temporary identity and desires come to an end, but the soul attains unity with universal consciousness. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is the return of essence to its true nature. The individual self dissolves. The sense of separation disappears. The soul merges with infinite and boundless consciousness. The union of Atman and Brahman is prepared through a lifelong journey of purification and awareness. Karma and experiences mature the soul. Death is seen as the culmination of this process, where the soul reaches ultimate freedom. According to this theory, death is not an end, but the beginning of union with universal consciousness. Individual identity dissolves, and the soul continues to exist within infinite wholeness. And according to Hindu understanding, a human being does not disappear with death. Only the limited self dissolves and returns to its true essence. Theory 43. The ascent of the soul in Neoplatonism. In Neoplatonism, death is seen as the process by which the soul separates from the body and ascends to a higher level of existence. The body dies, physical functions come to an end, but the soul moves toward its own essence and toward divine unity. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is a conscious process of purification and transformation. The soul is freed from worldly attachments and comes into harmony with the universal flow. In Neoplatonism, the soul is shaped by the knowledge, virtue, and experiences accumulated during life. Death is accepted as the moment when these accumulations carry the soul to a higher level. Souls that have lived well unite with divine reality. Souls with remaining deficiencies may return to the world to continue learning. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a process that enables the soul's ascent and maturation. The individual self dissolves. The soul unites with universal divine reality. And according to Neoplatonic thought, a human being does not disappear with death. The soul continues its journey and reaches a higher level of existence. Theory 44. The view of the continuity of consciousness. According to the view of the continuity of consciousness, death means only the end of the body. Consciousness does not completely disappear at this point. In this understanding, the soul or consciousness continues beyond the physical limits of life. Experiences and awareness do not end with death. They are simply transferred to a different plane or dimension. The continuity of consciousness emphasizes that death is not an end, but a transformation. Perceptions of time and space may change, yet consciousness maintains its existence and opens to new experiences. According to this theory, death is not annihilation, but a transition in which consciousness continues in a different form. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death. Consciousness transcends the limits of the body and continues to exist. Theory 45. The absence of time after death. In some philosophical and mystical understandings, death is seen as a state in which the effect of time comes to an end. The body stops, the measurable flow of life ceases. But the soul or consciousness is no longer limited by concepts such as past, present, and future. In this understanding, death is not annihilation, but a transition beyond time. The soul reaches a mode of existence independent of chronological order. The experiences and awareness accumulated during life gain a unified wholeness beyond time. The absence of time means the removal of boundaries for the soul. Death is not a loss of conscious awareness or experience. On the contrary, it is accepted as the beginning of a boundless state of existence. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a passage beyond time. As the individual self dissolves, the soul continues its existence in a different dimension. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death, is freed from the limits of time, and continues to exist on a new plane. Theory 46. The dissolution of identity. In some philosophical and mystical understandings, death is accepted as the dissolution of individual identity. The body stops, life comes to an end, yet the soul or consciousness continues to exist beyond its limits. In this view, death is not annihilation, but the end of the limited self and the process of uniting with the universal whole. Personal thoughts, desires, and attachments dissolve. The soul is freed from concepts of separation and limitation. The dissolution of identity shows that the individual is not limited only to physical existence, but also transcends ego and personal identity. Death releases this limited identity and allows the soul to return to its true nature. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a process of transformation and liberation. As the individual identity dissolves, the essence or soul continues to exist. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death, only dissolves boundaries and unites with a broader existence. Theory 47. The idea of the eternal cycle. According to the idea of the eternal cycle, life and death are not limited to a single beginning and end. Each death opens the door to a new life. Death is not an end, but a point of transition. In this understanding, the soul or consciousness continues to exist within a continuous cycle. Experiences, choices, and lessons learned are carried from one life to another. Each life is built upon the experiences of the previous one. The eternal cycle emphasizes both individual development and universal order. The soul does not disappear with death. It merely transforms and is reborn. This process offers a continuous opportunity for learning and maturation. According to this theory, death is not an end, but part of an ongoing flow and repetition. As the individual self dissolves, the soul's journey continues. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death, simply continues the journey within a cycle. Theory 48. The liberation of consciousness. In some philosophical and mystical understandings, death is seen as a process in which consciousness is freed from all limitations. The body stops, physical life comes to an end. Yet consciousness is no longer bound by the material world or by time. In this view, death is not annihilation. It is the return of consciousness to its own essence and to universal reality. Personal identity, desires, and fears dissolve. Consciousness is released into a boundless field of existence. Death is accepted as a moment of complete awakening for the soul or consciousness. The experiences gained throughout life find meaning within this process of liberation. Consciousness continues its journey as a being no longer defined by limits. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a transition in which consciousness transcends boundaries and becomes free. As the individual self dissolves, consciousness continues its existence on a new plane. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death. Consciousness is liberated and unites with the universal whole. Theory 49. Death as completion. In many philosophical and mystical traditions, death is not seen as an end, but as the moment when life and the soul's journey are completed. The body stops, physical life comes to an end. Yet the soul or consciousness integrates the experiences and gains of the lived life. Death is the process in which what was incomplete is fulfilled, and the individual journey becomes a whole. In this understanding, death is not regarded as loss or annihilation, but as both an ending and a beginning. The soul matures through the lessons and awareness distilled from past choices and experiences. Death reveals the meaning and coherence of life. Each life gains completion through death. The individual self dissolves, and the soul returns to the essence of its being. And according to this theory, a human being does not disappear with death. Life and experience are completed as a whole, and the soul continues to exist within the universal flow. Theory 50. Philosophical silence. According to the concept of philosophical silence, death is the moment of complete separation from the complexity of life and from individual identity. The body stops, physical experience comes to an end. Yet the soul or consciousness continues to exist within the depth of silence. In this view, death is not annihilation, but a transition in which consciousness is freed from all mental and emotional turbulence. Concepts of time, space, and identity dissolve. The soul experiences only the pure essence of existence. Philosophical silence does not see death as something to be feared. On the contrary, it is a state of calm and integration for consciousness and soul. The awareness and experiences gained throughout life find meaning within this silence. According to this theory, death is not an end, but a silent completion and liberation of consciousness. As the individual self dissolves, the soul continues its existence on a deep and boundless plane. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death, simply becomes whole in silence and continues existence within the universal flow. Theory 51. Hades. In Greek mythology, Hades is accepted as the place where souls go after death. The body dies. The soul passes into the underworld, into the realm of Hades. Hades is neither entirely hell nor heaven. There, souls carry the effects of the choices and actions they made during life. Sometimes they find peace, and sometimes they remain under the shadow of earthly attachments. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is seen as the soul continuing its existence on a different plane. The soul encounters its own past and the consequences of its lived life. Hades symbolizes the finality of death and the soul's separation from the world. But it is also a transition in which the soul adapts to a new level of existence. According to this theory, death is the end of the body, but the soul continues its existence in Hades, carrying its experiences and preparing for another stage of being. Theory 52. The river Lethe. In Greek mythology, the river Lethe is the river of forgetfulness that souls encounter after death. The body dies. The soul enters the underworld and drinks from the waters of Lethe. This river erases the memories of the past life. The soul is cleansed of earthly experiences. The act of forgetting is seen as a preparation for rebirth. The loss of memory allows the soul to pass into a new life or a new stage of existence. Lethe symbolizes not the destructive, but the transformative nature of death. Freed from attachments and worldly identity, the soul opens a new chapter. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but through the river Lethe, the soul is purified of memory and prepared for a new existence. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death, is simply released from the burdens of the past life and continues the soul's journey. Theory 53. Valhalla. In Norse mythology, Valhalla is the sacred hall where heroes go after death. The body dies. The soul of those who fall bravely in battle ascends to Odin's hall. Valhalla is not a place of punishment or annihilation. It is a realm where the soul is honored and rewarded. Fallen heroes take part in an eternal process of preparation and training, growing stronger in service of future battles and the order of the cosmos. In this understanding, death is not an end, but a chosen and meaningful transition. The individual self does not vanish. Rather, the soul shaped by courage and virtue retains its worth. According to this theory, Death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its existence in Valhalla, united with heroic values. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death. The soul gains meaning through the virtues and values earned in life and continues in a new dimension. Theory 54. Duat. In ancient Egyptian belief, Duat is the underworld through which souls pass after death. The body dies, the soul journeys into Duat and undergoes a series of trials. Duat is not merely a place. It represents a process of purification and judgment. The soul confronts the account of its actions during life. Those who lived rightly are protected, while faults are corrected or punished. In this understanding, death is not annihilation, but the journey of the soul. Duat symbolizes separation from the world and preparation for the next stage of existence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey and Duat is purified and prepared for the next life. And according to this understanding, a human being does not disappear with death. The soul passes through trials and purification and becomes integrated with the universal order. Theory 55. Kur. In ancient mythology, Kur is described as the deep and chaotic region of the underworld that the soul passes through after death. The body dies, the soul begins its journey toward the labyrinthine structure of Kur. Kur is not merely a place, but a realm of transformation and trial for the soul. Here, the soul confronts darkness, traces of its past life, and its own fears. This process is considered necessary for the soul's purification and maturation. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is a passage and a period of testing. As the individual self dissolves, the soul is guided closer to its essence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul passes through trials in Kur, transforms, and prepares for the next stage. And according to this view, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul matures through its dark journey and takes a step toward uniting with the universal whole. Theory 56. Mictlan. In Aztec mythology, Mictlan is the underworld to which the souls of the dead travel. The body dies. After death, the soul embarks on a long and difficult journey. Mictlan is not an easy realm to cross. Along the way, the soul must face various obstacles and trials. This journey allows the soul to be purified and to confront the actions of its earthly life. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is a process of transformation and preparation for the soul. As the soul travels through Mictlan, it carries the effects of its past life and gradually matures. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul gains experience through the journey of Mictlan and prepares for the next phase of existence. And according to this view, the human being does not disappear with death. The soul transforms through trials and journey and continues its existence. Theory 57. Xibalba. In Maya mythology, Xibalba is the underworld through which souls pass after death. The body dies. The soul travels through dark and dangerous paths beneath the earth. Xibalba is not merely a realm of death, but a domain of testing and purification for the soul. Along labyrinth-like paths, the soul encounters obstacles and various deities. This journey enables the soul to gain experience and to confront the actions of its earthly life. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is a transition and a process of maturation for the soul. By passing through the trials of Xibalba, the soul prepares for the next stage of existence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but through its dark journey, the soul gains experience and undergoes transformation. And according to this view, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul passes through trials and purification and joins the universal flow. Theory 58. The Otherworld. In Celtic belief, the otherworld is a mysterious realm that souls enter after death. The body comes to an end. The soul crosses into the otherworld and steps into a different plane of existence. The otherworld is neither purely heaven nor purely hell. It is a timeless domain where the soul continues its existence, shaped by the actions, choices, and experiences of earthly life. For some souls, it is a place of peace, beauty, and rest. For others, it becomes a space of learning, reflection, and inner trials. In this belief, death is not seen as destruction. It is a transition, a movement from one mode of being to another. Within the otherworld, time and space lose their familiar meaning. The soul exists beyond linear time, completing its journey at its own pace. The otherworld represents continuity rather than judgment. The soul does not disappear. It deepens its awareness. Memories, lessons, and identity may soften, but the essence of being remains present. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul enters the otherworld, where new experiences and deeper awareness unfold. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul continues its journey in the otherworld, existing on a new and quieter plane. Theory 59. Yomi. In Japanese mythology, Yomi is the underworld where souls go after death. The body dies. The soul passes into the dark and silent lands of Yomi. Yomi is not primarily a place of reward or punishment. Instead, it represents separation, the final departure from the world of the living. The soul carries the weight of its former life and exists in a shadowed state, shaped by what it once was. In Yomi, life as it was known no longer continues, yet existence itself does not end. The soul remains transformed, distanced from earthly attachments and familiar identity. Death in this understanding is not annihilation. It is a crossing into stillness and quiet continuity. As the personal self slowly dissolves, the soul prepares for a different mode of being, one no longer bound to action or desire. Yomi emphasizes acceptance rather than fear. It reflects the idea that death is a natural passage, not a moral verdict. The soul endures even as the world of life is left behind. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its existence within Yomi. And according to this view, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul gains experience within the silent underworld and joins the broader flow of existence. Theory 60. The world of ancestors in ancient China. In ancient Chinese belief, death is defined by the soul's transition into the world of ancestors. The body dies. The soul continues to exist within a sacred and protective realm inhabited by those who came before. In this world, ancestors are not distant or forgotten. They remain connected to the living, offering guidance, protection, and balance. The soul carries the influence of its earthly life and retains its role within the larger family and cosmic order. The world of ancestors is neither a place of punishment nor simple reward. It is a continuation of responsibility and presence. Virtuous actions during life strengthen the soul's position, granting honor and harmony in this realm. Death in this belief is not an ending. It is a transformation of role, from living participant to guiding presence. The soul integrates its experiences and becomes part of an enduring lineage that supports the living world. This understanding emphasizes continuity, memory, and harmony. The soul does not disappear. It becomes woven into the structure of existence itself. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues to exist within the world of ancestors, united with accumulated values and wisdom. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul lives on, connected to the past, the living, and the universal order. Theory 61. Orphic purification of the soul. According to the Orphic tradition, death begins with the separation of the soul from the body and the start of a purification process. The body dies. The soul sets out on a journey to cleanse itself from earthly attachments and the lingering influences of past lives. In this understanding, death is not annihilation, but refinement and maturation of the soul. The soul confronts the experiences, mistakes, and imbalances accumulated during life. This confrontation is not punishment, but preparation, shaping the soul for a new life or a higher divine level of existence. In Orphic teaching, purification means liberation. As the soul is cleansed, it returns closer to its true essence. The individual ego gradually dissolves. Through trials and experiences, the soul reaches a purer and more conscious state of being. Death, in this view, is a meaningful passage rather than an ending. Each phase of purification brings the soul closer to harmony with the universal order. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul transforms through purification and continues its journey. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul is cleansed, matures, and takes a step toward union with the universal whole. Theory 62. Hermetic ascension of the soul. In the Hermetic tradition, death is the process through which the soul separates from the body and ascends to a higher level of consciousness. The body dies, physical existence ends, but the soul's journey continues. Here, death is not destruction. It is the soul's purification and union with universal knowledge. Through life, the soul gathers experience and awareness. Death becomes the moment when this accumulated wisdom enables ascension. According to Hermetic teaching, the soul is freed from the limitations of the personal self at death. Time and space no longer apply in the same way. The essence of the soul moves beyond material boundaries and merges with the greater cosmic order. This ascent is not sudden or chaotic. It reflects an inner alignment between knowledge, awareness, and being. the soul reaches a broader and more refined state of existence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul rises, continuing its journey toward expanded consciousness. And according to this understanding, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul ascends, is purified, and continues within the universal flow. Theory 63. Layers of the soul. In Kabbalistic thought, the soul is understood as a multi-layered existence rather than a single, unified entity. The body dies, physical life ends, but the layers of the soul continue to exist across different planes. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is the gradual unfolding and refinement of the soul's layers. Levels such as Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama represent distinct dimensions of consciousness and experience. With death, each layer returns to its corresponding realm. Some aspects remain closer to the material world, while others ascend toward higher spiritual dimensions. The soul's journey continues through these layers, each integrating with the universal order in its own way. According to Kabbalah, the soul matures through awareness and lived experience. Death marks a stage in this maturation, allowing the soul to reach a higher level of consciousness and clarity. This process is orderly rather than abrupt. The dissolution of layers reflects balance, correction, and spiritual growth. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues to exist through its layers, integrating with universal consciousness. And according to this understanding, the human being does not disappear with death. The layers of the soul unfold, are refined, and rise toward a higher plane of existence. Theory 64. Nav. In Finno-Ugric and early Scandinavian traditions, Nav represents the realm to which souls travel after death. The body dies. Physical life comes to an end. The soul, however, passes into Nav, an underground or otherworldly domain where existence continues in a different form. Nav is not understood as a place of punishment or reward. It is not a moral court nor a paradise. Instead, it is a continuation of the soul's journey, shaped by the choices, actions, and inner state formed during life. In Nav, the soul carries the imprint of its earthly experiences. Memories, tendencies, and accumulated awareness remain not as burdens, but as elements of maturation. Here, the soul gradually adapts to a non-physical mode of existence, completing a process of inner transformation. In this understanding, death is not erasure. It is a passage from one layer of reality to another. As personal identity loosens, the soul gains distance from purely individual concerns and moves closer to a broader universal flow. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey within Nav, existing and evolving in a new dimension. And according to this understanding, the human being does not disappear with death. The soul endures, moving forward within the greater rhythm of existence. Theory 65. Continuity of the soul in African mythologies. In many African mythological systems, death is not seen as the disappearance of the soul, but as a transition into another mode of existence. The body dies, The soul moves into the ancestral realm or into the spiritual domains of nature. The soul retains what was gathered during life: experience, character, energy, and memory. Rather than fading away, the deceased may become an ancestor, a guiding, protecting, or observing presence within the community. In this worldview, the boundary between the living and the dead is not absolute. Ancestors remain connected to the living through ritual, memory, and moral continuity. They influence events, offer protection, and preserve collective wisdom. Death, therefore, is not an individual ending. It is a transformation of role. The soul shifts from personal existence to communal and cosmic participation. Nature itself is often seen as alive with spirit. The soul merges with ancestral forces, land, animals, and unseen energies, sustaining a continuous cycle of existence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey in another realm, maintaining presence and influence. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul integrates with ancestral and universal order, remaining part of the living whole. Theory 66. The Manes Spirits. In ancient Roman belief, the manes are the spirits of the dead. The body dies. The soul becomes an unseen presence that remains connected to family, lineage, and community. The manes are not distant or abstract entities. They are regarded as protective and guiding spirits, capable of influencing the lives of the living. Through remembrance, offerings, and rituals, the bond between the living and the dead is maintained. In this view, death does not sever identity completely. The individual self softens, but relational identity remains. The soul continues as part of a collective ancestral presence. The manes carry the memory of past lives and shared history. They embody continuity between generations, between past and present. Their existence reinforces the idea that life extends beyond physical boundaries. Death, therefore, is not disappearance. It is relocation into a subtler form of being, where influence persists without physical presence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul lives on as a Manes spirit within the unseen order. And according to this understanding, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul continues as a guiding and protective presence, integrated into the universal structure of life. Theory 67. Alchemical transformation. In alchemical philosophy, death is understood as a stage of transformation rather than an end. The body dies. Physical existence dissolves. Yet the soul enters a process of refinement, similar to the transformation of base matter into gold. Alchemy views existence as a continual cycle of dissolution and reformation. Just as substances are broken down, purified, and recombined, the soul undergoes its own inner alchemy. Death marks the moment when the gross material form is released, allowing the essence to continue its work. In this understanding, death is not destruction. It is a passage through nigredo, the dark phase of dissolution, followed by purification and elevation. The experiences, knowledge, and awareness gathered during life are not lost. They are distilled. The individual ego gradually dissolves. What remains is a more refined consciousness, no longer bound by physical limitation or personal attachment. the soul moves toward a higher state of harmony, closer to universal order. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues through transformation, purification, and ascent. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul changes form, becomes refined, and rises toward a higher level of existence. Theory 68. Death and Gnostic Cosmology. In Gnostic thought, death is the moment when the soul separates from the deceptive layers of the material world. The body dies. The soul loosens its bonds to matter and illusion. Gnosticism views the physical world as incomplete or distorted, a realm that obscures true reality. Life is a period of forgetting, while death becomes a moment of remembering. The soul recalls its origin beyond matter and begins its return. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is awakening. The soul carries with it the knowledge gained through experience, suffering, and insight. The personal identity shaped by the material world gradually fades. What remains is the inner spark, the divine fragment of consciousness. Freed from material constraint, the soul moves toward light, unity, and higher awareness. Death in Gnostic cosmology is liberation from confinement. It is the end of imprisonment within form and the beginning of reunion with the divine source. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues by reuniting with knowledge, light, and truth. And according to this understanding, the human being does not disappear with death. The soul is released from material limits and rises toward a luminous divine existence. Theory 69. The Astral World. In many mystical and esoteric traditions, the astral world is described as an intermediate realm entered after death. The body dies, the soul withdraws from the physical plane and enters a subtler dimension of existence. This realm is not bound by physical laws in the same way as the material world. Space, time, and form are more fluid. Consciousness shapes experience more directly. In this understanding, death is not an end, but a shift of awareness. The soul carries emotional patterns, memories, and energetic traces from earthly life. These elements influence the soul's experience in the astral realm. The astral world is often seen as a place of adjustment and learning. Some souls rest and regain balance. Others continue to explore, reflect, and release unresolved attachments. While individual identity may soften, the essence of consciousness remains intact. Over time, the soul may move onward, dissolving further into universal flow or preparing for another phase of existence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey within the astral world, adapting to a new level of reality. And according to this understanding, the human being does not cease with death. The soul transcends material limits and continues within the greater structure of existence. Theory 70. The Gate of Death Motif. In mythology and folklore, the Gate of Death is a symbolic passage through which the soul leaves the world and enters the afterlife. The body dies. The soul passes through this gate, moving beyond the boundaries of physical existence. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is a transition and a transformation. The gate represents a threshold where one state of being ends and another begins. The experiences and wisdom gained during life accompany the soul on this passage. The gate of death motif symbolizes the dissolution of the individual self and the soul's entry into the universal flow. After crossing, the soul reaches a different level of awareness and freedom, no longer bound by earthly limitations. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey by passing through the gate of death and existing within a new dimension. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul transcends boundaries and merges with the greater whole. Theory 71. The weighing of the soul. In ancient Egyptian belief, death is a process in which the soul is measured by the deeds of one's life. The body dies. The soul is brought before the scales of Mahat, as described in the Book of the Dead. In this way, the heart is judged according to the balance of good and harmful actions. The soul's future path depends on justice and moral alignment. Light and pure souls move forward, while those burdened by wrongdoing undergo purification. In this understanding, death is not destruction. It is an evaluation and a moment of moral clarity. Although the personal life ends, the essence of the soul passes through judgment and seeks harmony with cosmic order. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul gains understanding through judgment and prepares for the next stage of existence. And according to this understanding, the human being does not disappear with death. The soul is shaped by its actions and moves toward unity with the universal order. Theory 72. Myths of the death journey. In many cultures, death is described as a journey into the unknown. The body dies. The soul departs from the world and travels toward the afterlife or the underworld. In death journey myths, the soul encounters obstacles, guides, and trials. These encounters are not random. They serve the soul's purification, maturation, and alignment with the greater order of existence. Along the journey, the personal identity gradually dissolves, and the soul approaches its true essence. In this understanding, death is not an end. It is a conscious passage and a meaningful transformation. Each culture expresses this journey through its own symbols and rituals, presenting death as a natural and significant part of life. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey, passes through trials, and joins the universal flow. And according to this understanding, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul matures through the journey and continues its existence on a new plane. Theory 73. Belief in the shadow world. In some mythological and cultural traditions, death is understood as the soul's passage into the shadow world. The body dies. The soul moves away from the light of life and enters a quiet, dim, and subdued realm of existence. The shadow world is not described as a place of punishment or reward. Rather, it is a transitional realm where the soul detaches from earthly bonds and personal identity begins to dissolve. Here, the soul carries the traces of its former life, memories and emotional imprints, while slowly turning inward toward its own essence. In this understanding, death is not annihilation. It is a passage, a process of purification and transformation. As the individual self fades, the soul gradually aligns itself with a broader, universal order of existence. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey within the shadow world, preparing for a new mode of being. And according to this understanding, the human being does not cease to exist with death. The soul transcends boundaries and finds its place within the universal flow. Theory 74. Mythological rebirth. In many mythologies, death is not seen as an ending but as the beginning of rebirth. The body dies. The soul sheds the limitations of its former life and moves toward a renewed form of existence. In this view, death is not destruction. It is transformation and continuation. The soul is reshaped by the experiences and wisdom gained during life. Death refines this accumulated meaning and carries it forward into a new phase. In mythological rebirth motifs, death functions like a gateway. The old identity dissolves, making room for a new level of awareness and being. Each death marks the start of a new cycle, emphasizing renewal rather than finality. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul is reborn through transformation and continues its journey. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. The soul is reborn and remains part of the eternal flow of existence. Theory 75. Death as a threshold. In many philosophical and mystical perspectives, death is not a conclusion, but a threshold. The body dies. The soul crosses beyond the limits of life into an unknown dimension. This threshold represents a space of transition and transformation. Worldly attachments and personal identity dissolve. The soul moves closer to its essence and toward unity with the greater whole. Death, in this sense, is more than the end of physical life. It is the moment when consciousness and the soul step into a new plane of existence. Each death functions as a passage point, completing one phase of being while opening another. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the soul continues its journey by crossing the threshold into a new dimension. And according to this understanding, the human being does not disappear with death. The soul is transformed through the threshold and joins the universal flow once more. Theory 76. The complete cessation of consciousness. In some philosophical perspectives, death is accepted as the definitive end of consciousness and subjective awareness. The body dies. The mind and consciousness lose all function, and experience comes to a complete halt. In this view, death is the clearest expression of non-existence. The soul or consciousness does not continue independently of the body. The individual self disappears entirely. No awareness, thought, or experience persists after death. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body and is completed by the total cessation of consciousness. Life and experience end together with physical limits. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases to exist with death. No consciousness, soul, or essence continues beyond it. Theory 77. Near-death experiences. Near-death experiences describe conscious events reported during moments when a person comes extremely close to clinical death. As the body loses vital functions, individuals report vivid and highly realistic experiences. These experiences often include sensations of leaving the body, moving through a tunnel, seeing a bright light, and feeling a profound sense of peace. Some individuals describe reviewing their past lives, while others report encounters with loved ones or guiding beings. In this understanding, near-death experiences suggest that consciousness may not be entirely limited to the body. As death approaches, awareness appears to enter a different state, and perceptions of time and space undergo dramatic change. According to this theory, death is a threshold experienced at the limits of the body. As this threshold is approached, consciousness enters an altered field of experience. And according to this understanding, the human being may not completely vanish at the moment of death. Consciousness may persist, even briefly, beyond bodily boundaries. Theory 78. The neurological explanation of the tunnel experience. According to some scientific research, the tunnel experience is linked to altered states of consciousness occurring at the moment of death. As the body shuts down, the brain produces unusual electrical activity due to oxygen deprivation and neural stress. During this process, individuals may feel as if they are moving through a tunnel or traveling toward a bright light. Perceptions of time and space shift, and the sense of bodily boundaries dissolves. These experiences are explained as consciousness states generated by the brain as death approaches. In this view, the tunnel experience is not a spiritual transition, but a neurological process. The finality of death is not removed. Rather, consciousness produces extraordinary experiences through the brain's electrical and chemical responses. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, and the tunnel experience reflects the brain's reactions in its final moments. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases to exist with death. Yet the brain and consciousness may create intense and unusual experiences in the final moments of life. Theory 79. The expansion of time perception at the moment of death. According to some scientific and psychological studies, the perception of time may change as death approaches. As the body shuts down and the brain experiences oxygen deprivation, events may be perceived as slowed or extended. During this process, sensations such as a rapid review of one's life, tunnel experiences, or visions of light may occur. A brief intensification of neural activity alters the flow of consciousness and expands the perception of time. A moment lasting only seconds may be experienced as if it were hours long. In this understanding, death is not a spiritual continuation, but a process in which the brain and consciousness operate under extreme conditions. The bending of time is seen not as a metaphysical phenomenon, but as a neurological one. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but consciousness may experience an altered state through the expansion of time perception at the moment of death. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases to exist with death. Yet perception and consciousness may enter an extraordinary state as a brain-based process while approaching it. Theory 80. The brain's turn toward final memories. According to some scientific research, the brain may activate final memories as death approaches. As bodily functions begin to fail, neural activity may rapidly review past experiences. During this process, individuals may feel as if they are watching the most significant moments of their lives like a film. Time spent with loved ones, important decisions, or long-forgotten memories may suddenly surface in consciousness. These intense neural processes help explain the experience often described as one's life flashing before their eyes. In this understanding, death is not a continuation beyond the body, but a process shaped by consciousness and neural activity under extreme conditions. Individual awareness revisits meaningful moments through the brain's final surge of activity. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but the brain turns toward final memories, creating an unusual experience within consciousness. And according to this understanding, the human being does not continue beyond death. The experiences reported are limited to the brain's activity at the moment of dying. Theory 81. The dependence of consciousness on the brain. According to some scientific and philosophical views, consciousness is entirely dependent on the brain. The body dies. As brain functions cease, consciousness also comes to an end. In this understanding, death is seen as non-existence. Individual awareness, thought, and emotion exist only through brain activity. When the brain stops, consciousness ends as well. Consciousness does not continue as an independent entity at the moment of death. Mind, experience, and awareness are wholly tied to physical processes. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body and the brain. Consciousness can no longer persist, and according to this understanding, the human being ceases to exist with death. Consciousness and experience end together with the body. Theory 82. The ORC-O, or quantum consciousness theory. The ORC, or orchestrated objective reduction theory, proposes that consciousness may arise not only from neurons in the brain, but from processes occurring at the quantum level. The body dies. Neural functions come to an end. Yet, according to supporters of the theory, consciousness may continue to exist independently at a quantum scale. In this view, death is not complete annihilation, but the possibility that consciousness persists on a different level of reality. Through quantum processes, consciousness may remain connected to the universal whole. When the brain's classical functions cease, these quantum activities may allow conscious experience to continue, at least for a limited time. The ORC, or theory, offers a scientific perspective on death and the nature of consciousness. It suggests that consciousness, or something resembling it, may exist beyond physical boundaries. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but consciousness may continue in a limited form through quantum processes. And according to this understanding, the human being does not fully cease to exist with death. Consciousness may persist at the quantum level, remaining connected to the universal flow. Theory 83. The debate on quantum information preservation. According to some theoretical physics and quantum approaches, information in the universe cannot be destroyed. The body dies. Neural processes stop, but the information produced by the brain may not be completely lost. In this understanding, death is not total annihilation, but the possibility that information is preserved on a different level. Consciousness and mental experiences may interact with the universal whole, at the quantum scale, allowing information to persist. This debate reopens the question of whether consciousness is truly confined to the physical body. Quantum information preservation suggests that death may not be an absolute end. If information continues to exist within the universal order, the possibility emerges that consciousness or its imprint may continue in another dimension. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but information may continue to exist within the universal domain through quantum processes. And according to this understanding, the human being does not fully disappear with death. Consciousness and information may retain their connection to the universal whole. Theory 84. Death according to simulation theory. According to simulation theory, the universe and life itself are part of an advanced technological simulation. The body dies, the physical form ends, but consciousness or identity may continue to exist as data. In this view, death is not annihilation, but the termination of a program within the simulation or a transition to another state. Consciousness as encoded information may be reorganized, transferred, or accessed within another layer of the simulation. Experiences gathered throughout life may be preserved as data and potentially reused in later stages. From the simulation perspective, death is merely a physical boundary within the system. Consciousness or identity may continue to exist in a different form within the simulation's underlying structure. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body, but consciousness may continue to exist within the simulation's data framework. And according to this understanding, the human being does not cease to exist with death. Consciousness may continue in another dimension within the limits of the simulation. Theory 85. The multiverse interpretation. According to the multiverse interpretation, reality is not limited to a single universe. Instead, countless universes may exist simultaneously, each containing different versions of events, outcomes, and states of being. The body dies, physical life ends, yet consciousness or identity may continue in another universe. In this understanding, death is not annihilation, but a probabilistic and evolutionary transition. Every decision, every experience, and every moment may branch into alternative realities. The moment of death, rather than being a final endpoint, could represent a divergence point, a shift in which consciousness no longer continues in this universe, but persists in another. The multiverse perspective challenges the idea of a single, absolute ending. Even if the individual identity dissolves in one reality, awareness may continue in a parallel existence where different conditions apply. Death, then, is not a collapse into nothingness, but a change in the universe where experience unfolds. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body in this universe, but consciousness or awareness may continue within one of many possible universes. And according to this understanding, the human being does not vanish with death. Consciousness may continue its journey across alternative realities. Theory 86. Entropy and death. In physics, entropy describes the tendency of systems to move toward disorder and equilibrium. The body dies. Biological order breaks down, and the organized processes that sustain life begin to dissolve. In this view, death is not annihilation, but part of the ongoing transformation of energy and matter. While the body loses its structure, its components do not disappear. They change form and re-enter the broader flow of the universe. From the perspective of entropy, life and death are inseparable aspects of the same universal process. Every living system temporarily resists disorder, creating structure and meaning. Death marks the moment when this resistance ends and the system returns to the larger cosmic balance. Individual identity dissolves, but existence itself does not end. Energy disperses, matter transforms, and the components of life continue in new configurations. Death is not a failure of existence, but a return to the universal process of change. According to this theory, death begins with the end of biological order, but energy and matter continue their journey through transformation. And according to this understanding, the human being does not become nothing. Existence continues in different forms within the entropic flow of the universe. Theory 87. Death as a biological endpoint. From a biological perspective, death is defined as the complete cessation of an organism's vital functions. Heart activity stops, respiration ends, and brain activity permanently ceases. The body is no longer alive. In this understanding, death is not framed in spiritual or metaphysical terms, but as the natural conclusion of biological processes. Questions of soul or consciousness lie outside the scope of empirical science and remain unverified. Death is an essential part of the life cycle shared by all living organisms. Cells break down, tissues decompose, and the body returns its materials to the environment. Through this process, matter and energy are recycled into new forms of life. Life continues not through individual awareness, but through biological continuity and ecological balance. Death allows ecosystems to renew, evolve, and sustain future generations. According to this theory, death begins with the irreversible end of bodily functions. Consciousness and awareness cannot be scientifically demonstrated beyond this point, and according to this understanding, the human being ends as a biological organism. The body dissolves into nature, completing the physical cycle of existence. Theory 88. Consciousness as a byproduct. According to some neuroscientific perspectives, consciousness is not a fundamental entity, but an emergent byproduct of complex brain activity. The body dies. As neural processes shut down, consciousness fades and ultimately disappears. In this view, consciousness does not exist independently. Thoughts, emotions, memories, and the sense of self arise from biochemical and electrical interactions within the brain. When these interactions stop, there is no remaining structure capable of producing awareness. Death within this framework represents a definitive end rather than a transition. There is no separate soul leaving the body, no awareness observing its own absence. The individual experience simply ceases, much like a flame going out when fuel is removed. The byproduct theory emphasizes finality. Life is meaningful precisely because it is temporary. Experience exists only while the physical system that generates it remains active. According to this theory, death begins with the failure of the brain's processes and ends with the complete disappearance of consciousness. And according to this understanding, the human being, does not continue beyond death. Awareness ends when the biological conditions that produce it are gone. Theory 89. The end of time perception with the brain. Scientific models suggest that the perception of time is constructed by the brain. Past, present, and future are not external realities, but internal experiences shaped by neural activity. The body dies. As the brain stops functioning, time itself disappears from experience. In this understanding, death is absolute from the perspective of awareness. Without a functioning brain, there is no sequence of moments, no duration, no waiting. Time does not slow down, pause, or stretch it, simply ceases to be experienced. The idea of after death loses meaning here. Without consciousness, there is no observer to experience continuity or transition. Death is not an eternal darkness, but the absence of any perception at all. This view reframes death not as an event within time, but as the end of time for the individual. All experiences, memories, and expectations dissolve with the brain that generated them. According to this theory, death begins with the cessation of brain activity, and with it, the experience of time vanishes completely. And according to this understanding, the human being does not exist within time after death. Experience itself ends with the brain. Theory 90. The energy conservation misinterpretation. Some popular beliefs suggest that because energy cannot be destroyed, human consciousness or the soul must continue after death. However, scientific interpretations reject this conclusion. The body dies, biological systems shut down, and energy disperses through purely physical processes. In this view, energy conservation applies only to measurable physical systems. Heat, chemical energy, and matter are redistributed into the environment, but subjective experience does not persist as a transferable form of energy. Consciousness is not treated as an independent energy field. It is understood as a pattern produced by organized neural activity. When that organization collapses, the pattern does not survive, even though the underlying physical components continue to exist. This perspective highlights a common misunderstanding. Energy may remain in the universe, but experience does not. Awareness requires structure, integration, and function, all of which end with death. According to this theory, death begins with the collapse of biological organization, and consciousness ends despite the continued circulation of physical energy. And according to this understanding, the human being does not persist as awareness after death. Only matter and energy remain, transformed and dispersed within the universe. Theory 91. The non-transferability of consciousness. According to certain neuroscientific and philosophical perspectives, consciousness is inseparably bound to the specific structure and functioning of an individual brain. The body dies, neural activity ceases, and with it, the unique configuration that produces awareness disappears. Consciousness, in this view, cannot be copied, transferred, uploaded, or relocated to another body, machine, or system. This understanding rejects the idea that consciousness is a detachable substance. Memories, personality, emotions, and self-awareness arise from highly specific neural connections shaped by genetics, development, and lived experience. Once the brain's structure collapses, there is no remaining framework capable of sustaining that subjective continuity. Death, therefore, is not a transition but an end point. Even if information about the brain were recorded or replicated, the original conscious experience would not continue. Any copy would be a new process, not the same awareness. The non-transferability of consciousness emphasizes the irreversibility of death. Individual experience exists only once in one biological system and ends when that system fails. According to this theory, death begins with the cessation of brain function, and consciousness cannot continue, migrate, or be preserved elsewhere. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases entirely at death. Awareness ends with the brain that generated it. Theory 92. The irreversibility of death. From biological and philosophical perspectives, death is understood as a fundamentally irreversible process. The body dies, the heart stops, the brain loses oxygen, and cellular systems begin to break down beyond recovery. Once critical thresholds are crossed, life cannot be restored. In this view, death represents a permanent end rather than a pause. Consciousness, memory, and personal identity are dependent on ongoing biological processes. When these processes terminate completely, there is no mechanism by which experience can resume. Unlike temporary states such as unconsciousness or coma, true death involves structural degradation. Neural networks disintegrate, synaptic patterns vanish, and the organization required for awareness is lost. No future intervention can reconstruct the same living system. The irreversibility of death highlights the finitude of life. Meaning, value, and urgency arise precisely because existence cannot be repeated or undone. According to this theory, death begins when biological systems fail beyond repair, and consciousness ends permanently and irretrievably. And according to this understanding, the human being does not persist after death. Life and awareness conclude with no return. Theory 93. The distinction between clinical death and true death. Medical science distinguishes between two states often described as death: clinical death and true death. Clinical death occurs when the heart stops and blood circulation ceases. At this stage, the body appears lifeless, but biological systems may still be recoverable for a limited time. During clinical death, brain cells have not yet undergone irreversible damage. With rapid medical intervention such as resuscitation or defibrillation, circulation and brain activity can sometimes be restored. Experiences reported during this phase occur before true biological death has taken place. True death, however, is defined by the complete and irreversible cessation of brain function. Once brain tissue is destroyed and neural activity cannot resume, consciousness permanently ends. At this point, the body is no longer capable of supporting awareness or life. This distinction clarifies why some near-death experiences are possible, while death itself remains final. Clinical death is a reversible threshold. True death is not. According to this theory, death may appear temporarily reversible at the clinical stage, but true death marks the absolute and final end of consciousness. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases entirely with true death. Awareness and life end together, without continuation. Theory 94. The evolutionary function of consciousness. From certain biological and evolutionary perspectives, consciousness is understood as an adaptive tool rather than an independent substance. The body lives. Consciousness emerges as a functional process shaped by natural selection, serving survival, learning, and social coordination. In this view, consciousness evolved to help organisms interpret their environment, anticipate danger, form memories, and make decisions that increase the chances of survival and reproduction. Awareness, emotion, and self-reflection are not ends in themselves, but instruments that guide behavior in a complex world. Death within this framework marks the end of that function. When the body dies and the brain ceases to operate, consciousness no longer has a role to perform. There is no evolutionary advantage to consciousness continuing beyond the organism that sustains it. Experience and awareness are therefore temporary processes. They exist only as long as the biological system that generates them remains active. According to this theory, death begins with the end of bodily life, and consciousness concludes when its evolutionary purpose is fulfilled. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases at death. Consciousness ends as a function that is no longer biologically required. Theory 95. The resetting of brain activity. From a neuroscientific standpoint, death is defined by the complete cessation of neural activity. The body dies. Electrical and chemical signaling in the brain comes to a halt, and the processes that generate consciousness stop entirely. Thoughts, emotions, memories, and the sense of self are all produced by dynamic patterns of neural firing. When these patterns collapse, there is no mechanism left to sustain awareness. The brain does not enter a dormant state. It shuts down irreversibly. In this understanding, death represents a total reset rather than a transition. There is no residual consciousness waiting to awaken, and no hidden layer of awareness beyond neural function. The absence of brain activity means the absence of experience. The finality of this process reinforces the physical basis of the mind. Consciousness is not stored elsewhere. It exists only as long as neural systems remain active. According to this theory, death begins with the shutdown of the brain, and consciousness disappears when neural activity reaches zero. And according to this understanding, the human being ends with death. Awareness vanishes when the brain's activity is fully extinguished. Theory 96. The end of perception. Scientific and neurological perspectives describe perception as a process generated entirely by the brain. The body lives. Sensory input is received, interpreted, and transformed into experience through neural activity. Sight, sound, touch, memory, emotion, and thought all depend on functioning perceptual systems. When the body dies and the brain stops working, these systems collapse simultaneously. There is no longer a point of view from which anything can be experienced. In this view, death is the complete absence of perception. There is no darkness, no silence, no awareness of nothingness, because awareness itself no longer exists. Experience does not continue in another form. It simply ends. The cessation of perception emphasizes the finality of death. All distinctions between self and world dissolve because the perceiving subject is gone. According to this theory, death begins with the end of bodily and brain function, and perception, consciousness, and experience cease completely. And according to this understanding, the human being does not continue after death. All awareness ends with the brain that created it. Theory 97. Short-lived brain activity at the moment of death. Some neuroscientific studies suggest that at the moment of death, the brain may exhibit a brief surge of activity. The body's vital functions begin to fail. The heart slows or stops. Oxygen levels drop. Yet for a few seconds, and in some cases slightly longer, the brain can produce a final wave of intense electrical and neural activity. During this brief window, individuals who are later revived sometimes report vivid experiences. These may include flashes of memory, a rapid review of life events, bright lights, altered perceptions of time, or an overwhelming sense of intensity. From a scientific perspective, these experiences are understood as the brain's last coordinated response under extreme physiological stress. This activity does not imply a transition to another state of existence. Rather, it reflects the brain's attempt to maintain coherence as it loses oxygen and energy. Neural networks fire rapidly and irregularly, creating the illusion of a meaningful or structured experience. In this view, death remains an unavoidable end. The short-lived brain activity does not represent survival of consciousness, but its final expression before collapse. According to this theory, death begins as the body fails, and the brain may briefly generate experience in its final moments. And according to this understanding, the human being ultimately ceases to exist. Any last experiences end when brain activity fully stops. Theory 98. The localized structure of consciousness. Some neuroscientific models propose that consciousness is not a unified, independent entity, but a product of specific regions and networks within the brain. The body lives. Consciousness arises from coordinated activity in areas responsible for perception, memory, attention, and self-awareness. In this framework, consciousness is localized and distributed. Different aspects of awareness, vision, emotion, thought, identity depend on distinct neural systems working together. When these systems are damaged, altered, or destroyed, consciousness changes or disappears. Death, therefore, is the complete loss of this structure. When the brain ceases to function, the localized processes that generate awareness shut down permanently. There is no central core of consciousness that can separate from the brain and continue elsewhere. This view reinforces the irreversibility of death. Once the physical structures that support consciousness are gone, awareness cannot be restored or transferred. According to this theory, death begins with the end of brain function, and consciousness ends when its neural structures collapse. And according to this understanding, the human being ends at death. Consciousness cannot exist without the physical brain that produces it. Theory 99. Scientific uncertainty. From a strictly scientific standpoint, death occupies a space between clarity and mystery. The body dies, biological processes stop, and brain activity ceases. These physical facts are observable, measurable, and well understood. However, science faces limits when addressing subjective experience. While it can describe what happens to the body and brain, it cannot directly observe what, if anything, happens to consciousness beyond that point. Experiences reported near death, theoretical models, and philosophical interpretations raise questions that science cannot yet fully resolve. This does not mean that anything is proven to continue. Rather, it means that science cannot issue a final verdict on every aspect of death. The absence of evidence is not evidence of continuation, but it also leaves room for unanswered questions. Scientific uncertainty accepts death as biologically final, while acknowledging that the ultimate nature of consciousness remains partially unknown. Death is both a clearly defined physical event and a boundary beyond which direct observation is impossible. According to this theory, death begins with the end of bodily and brain function, but the ultimate status of consciousness remains unresolved. And according to this understanding, the human being may cease entirely or enter an unknown state. Death stands as both a biological certainty and a scientific mystery. Theory 100. The scientific final end. From a scientific perspective, death is the definite and irreversible end of life. The body dies. The heart, brain, and all vital functions cease, and biological processes come to a stop. In this understanding, death means non-existence. Individual consciousness, thought, and experience are limited to bodily and brain-based processes. When the body ends, consciousness comes to a complete end as well. Science cannot demonstrate the existence of a soul or consciousness beyond death. Death is the natural and final outcome of the life cycle. Within the framework of physical laws, it is irreversible. According to this theory, death begins with the end of the body. Consciousness, soul, and experience vanish when physical limits are reached. And according to this understanding, the human being ceases to exist with death. Consciousness and existence are completed together with life. This video comes to an end here. We've explored just one idea from different angles without rushing to a conclusion. There are many more theories like this waiting. Different questions, different perspectives, all meant to be approached slowly and calmly. If this way of thinking felt right to you, you can continue with another video whenever you want. There's no need to hurry. For now, let these thoughts rest. Let them fade as you relax. This is not the end of the questions. It's simply a pause. Sleepy theories